comment on that, or was it a separate question?
Well, it's a reflection really on 2 points.
Okay, we'll just get them up. And we'll come to the subject.
Thanks, John. It's a reflection really on 2 points. First, I'd like to warmly welcome the collaborative proposal that the Consul General has laid out for research and collaboration across a whole variety of areas, all of which I think would have a huge appeal to the university sector in the North East, certainly in this university. The second observation really is about the Daiwa scholarships, which are enormously valuable in aiding the kind of initiative that we've been discussing, and which points away, I think, for the future. At the risk, with the Foreign Office colleague in the room, of slightly courting controversy, perhaps I can just, I think perhaps make that point in the context of the Chevening scholarships, funding for which has recently been withdrawn, and the ORSAS awards, and of course they're not the Foreign Office but the Funding Council, likewise withdrawn. This kind of overseas support, or support for overseas students to come to Britain, is enormously important, and I think we just need to hold on to that, even though we're looking at tough times. Okay, thanks.
Trevor, could I just ask you, is there much movement between Nissan at Sunderland and Nissan in Japan?
Not an awful lot, to be honest. Not as much as there used to be. That is mainly to do with the skill that's been developed here, and also managing costs. When I mentioned before, we've got half of the Japanese management team here in terms of Shoji. If you go back to 1985, there was about 20 or even 30 Japanese people looking after the plant with us, if you like. So it's partly about cost. I'm not sure I completely agree. I'm sorry, I forgot that gentleman's opinions. I think a lot of the Japanese things we've taken for granted. I mean, certainly I go to and from Japan quite regularly, and the planes are as full today going both ways as they were back in 1985 when I first started travelling. And I think that a lot of the culture, the Japanese culture, has been accepted in the UK and is not as obvious. You take it for granted. Yeah? And I think from another professional perspective, we did feel from our side that the Japanese government was not as interested in Japan. And we actually mentioned that to them a number of years ago. And recently there has been quite a few ministerial visits to Japan. Stephen Timms has been there, the head of the BER, previous DTI, has been there recently. So I think there is an awful lot of going on, but we don't talk about it as much because it's not new. Yeah. So I'm not sure I completely share the views from my perspective.
Thank you. That's good. Question just here first.
Likewise, the others, I was impressed by the Consul General's perceptive sort of analysis, really. And one thing which struck me in particular was the sort of analysis and metaphor, really, of yes, an island, but actually an island looking out and building bridges and having to do so in all sorts of way. And that, I think, is a sort of perception I have of a gap on the British side, not so much on the Japanese one, because if you see what you sort of pointed out, certainly in the comment to one of the questions, was actually there's a European or EU dimension to that as well, which didn't actually come up on the side of the British speakers, except European export markets were mentioned as exports, not local content rural, as one of the reasons, I guess, why Nissan was going to the European Union and the UK to set up here. So if I understand it's about bilateral cooperation, but one of the ways in which, for instance, Germany would look towards building relationships with Japan and then strengthening and increasing them is actually through and with European Union collaborative, collective work, rather than just bilateral one. And that, strikingly, I think, didn't come up on the British side of the podium, I think. And I'm a German national and German citizen. I have been here in the UK for 14 years, and that just strikes me. as a gap on the British side in terms of imagination and realpolitik, even, if you like.
I mean, possibly take it at a slight tangent, because I was thinking, as we've been chatting over the last couple of minutes, that maybe part of the problem in terms of our perception of, how Britain interacts with Japan and vice versa, is that we're talking in bilateral terms. We're talking about Britain and Japan. We're not always focusing on the actual areas where cooperation is taking place. So if you look at science, you just need to go up the road and talk to people at Newcastle University, where there's a very important Alzheimer research centre, to find out that there are tremendous links with Japan. Maybe they're not very visible because we're talking about the Alzheimer's Research Centre, but the Consul General talked about the problem of the aging society in Japan, and that is a very relevant area for interaction. On the design side, we see tremendous links between the UK and Japan. We've had, as my colleague can attest, some very effective speakers, Japanese designers, at Daiwa, who've talked about their collaboration with British firms. One of the top young, very lively designers in Japan, who's really making a difference to the Tokyo landscape, is someone I discovered when I met him recently, who studied at Newcastle University, went to Japan, went to Tokyo on a 3-month scholarship, and is still there about 15 or 20 years later. So I think looking at it in terms of the actual areas of collaboration, it's an international framework. I don't think we should be looking just at, UK, Japan, what's happening here, what's happening there. We should be looking much more widely in terms of science, international links, and which kinds of research teams are the Japanese and the British fitting into. And behind that facade, I think there is actually quite a lot going on.